Texas weather discussion video for Tuesday, the 4th day of September. I'm Donovan Neal. We have lots to talk about here. We have Tropical Storm Gordon getting in the Gulf basically at this point, and we have Tropical Storm Florence in the Central Atlantic Basin and in the Central Atlantic Basin at this point. And what does this mean for North Texas? And will we see a surplus in rain due from the rain that we're already experiencing now? A lot of things to talk about. Hopefully, we'll answer all of your questions. Let's start out with the upper air look across the nation this morning across the continental United States. Now, keep in mind that this look is very typical for early September. We have your upper high in the mid-Atlantic states. To the west of that, we have our trough extending our trough in the western states. To the north of that, we have our mid-latitude westerlies off to the north, and down to the southeast of that, we have our tropical easterlies out to the east, and of course with the coordinates of Tropical Storm Gordon. And again, we'll get to that in just a second. But this is the radar early this morning at 5:34 a.m. You can see we have a few scattered shower. We have a few isolated showers about just to the west of the DFW metro near Mineral Wells and Weatherford, and of course that's moving off to the north. And we'll see an increase in that this afternoon as more moisture starts to increase this afternoon. We'll begin to mention more chances of scattered showers and thunderstorms. This is the watch warning map across the nation. We'll get to the deep south here in a little bit, but you can see we still have a continuation of heat advisories in effect for parts of Massachusetts and parts of New York State and some of the adjacent areas. And we have flash flood watches in effect for parts of the Central Plains extending into the Midwest near Iowa, Wisconsin, and Missouri. And we even have flash flood watches in effect near San Antonio and some of the adjacent areas where they've experienced some dangerous flooding. And going to the deep south, we have flash flood watches in effect for parts of Mississippi and parts of Louisiana and Arkansas and some of the adjacent states. And we have hurricane warnings in effect for parts of the New Orleans area, for much of New Orleans area, this county of Mobile and some of the adjacent areas, and counties off in our Gulf of Mexico. And surrounding that, we have tropical storm warnings for the adjacent areas. And again, I'll get to why we have hurricane warnings here in a little bit. But let's go to the convective outlooks for today. We have a standard slight risk in effect for parts of the Corn Belt. But let's focus down to the south, where we have a standard slight risk in effect for basically that area where we have that hurricane warning. Now, keep in mind, it's not in accordance with the hurricane warning, but we do want to mention that with Tropical Storm Gordon coming inland, it's worth noting that with the theater bands of this thing, it's very likely that these things produce gusty winds and small isolated tornadoes and waterspouts when this thing landfalls. And that's why we have that slight risk and marginal risk in effect for parts of the deep south. And it'll pretty much be the same deal tomorrow. Once this thing is basically on land, the theater bands will continue to feed in, and again, we'll continue to mention the risk for small isolated tornadoes and waterspouts as this thing moves inland. Now, keep in mind, in North Texas, we remain pretty green, which means we'll continue to see a risk for scattered into isolated showers and thunderstorms, but no organized severe weather is expected. And on day 3, which is Thursday, we have a marginal risk off to our northeast. Now, let's take a look at the Atlantic Basin. Take a look at the tropics. We have a lot of stuff going on here, so let's just break it down one by one. First off, we have a wave that's emerging off of the Atlantic coast that has basically a 10% chance of developing during the next 48 hours in the short term. But if we go to the 5-day outlook, we have the NHC gives it a 50-50 chance of developing during the next 5 days. And again, I think that we'll see some slow gradual development trailing Tropical Storm Florence at this point. But we'll just have to watch and worry about this with time. But let's focus on Tropical Storm Florence right now. Florence is basically near the Florence is basically out there in the middle of the central Atlantic. Maximum sustained winds are at 70 miles an hour, just barely below a hurricane. However, despite that, it's still expected to be a tropical storm until early Sunday morning, where this is expected to become a hurricane. Now, this thing is expected. Now, this now the NHC is expecting this thing to gain latitude and move to the north and move more to the northwest by basically with time. But some of these model outputs have been showing that this thing recurves out to the eastern coastal states. So we'll talk about that next. So this is the GFS ensemble for Tropical Storm Florence, and you can see that all models, with the exception of one, recurves this thing out to the northern Atlantic, with this not affecting the United States at all. And of course, that's very good because the mean, which is the black line, basically says the same deal. This recurves out to sea with nothing impacting the land areas at all. But let's go to the European deterministic run, and you can see that the European, this is valid Tuesday morning, September 11th. You can see the European basically tells the same thing. This thing basically recurves and stays well off the coast and stays well to the east of the coastal United States. And that's a very good sign because the European deterministic run was showing that this impacts the eastern United States near the Carolinas or somewhere in the Mid-Atlantic states, and of course that wouldn't be good at all. But keep in mind that this is still deterministic run, and this is not an actual forecast, but this is still a guidance. These are just ideas and opinions at this point. And now here's the main thing that we're focusing on: Tropical Storm Gordon. At this point, it's basically in the central Gulf of Mexico. It's packing maximum sustained winds at 65 miles an hour. It's moving to the west-northwest at around 17 miles an hour, and it is expected to become a hurricane later today, right before it makes landfall. And now that's the reason why we have hurricane warnings in effect for basically extending for areas near Baton Rouge through New Orleans through Mobile, Alabama. And once this landfalls, this is expected to weaken into a tropical depression by early Thursday morning, before reaching the Midwest by Sunday and becoming post-tropical cyclone. Right now, and keep in mind that this does not include much of North Texas at all. Earlier, the track did have it to include North Texas a couple of days ago, but that's now completely out of the question. This is the earliest reasonable arrival time of tropical storm force winds, and you can see the main impacts from this thing basically come today through Wednesday, and most of that just dissipates by Thursday. But you can see that the coastal area near Mississippi and Louisiana and parts of Mobile, Alabama, is basically in the line of some tropical storm force winds at this point. Now, this is the storm surge watches and warnings at this point. You can see storm surge warnings include the storm surge warnings include the coast of New Orleans extending towards Mobile, Alabama. For those surrounding areas in the purple, that's a storm surge watch. But you can see that dangerous storm surge and whip currents are expected from this thing, and that could be very, very dangerous. So if you're beach bound later today, I recommend stay off the beaches until this thing passes. Now, this is the rainfall for the next 3 days as a direct result from Tropical Storm Gordon, and you can see that there's a very narrow path for where this rains, and that very narrow path you can expect anywhere from around 2 to 6 inches of rain from this thing, with isolated amounts of around 6 to 10 inches here from Tropical Storm Gordon for where this thing basically travels. And you can see that this thing does not include North Texas at all. So if you were expecting rain from Tropical Storm Gordon from this thing in North Texas, don't get your hopes up from this thing, because most of the rain will stay basically where this thing travels, stays to the basically stays to the northeast of North Texas at this point. So flood risk. So again, you'll continue to expect a flood risk from this thing if you're in the line of this thing. So let's go to the intensity. This is the intensity guidance off of this. You can see that this thing wants. Of course, most models bring this to some models bring this to a Category 1 hurricane within the next 12 hours. But then this thing quickly weakens as this landfalls, and then it becomes a tropical depression in the next 48 hours to 48 to 60 hours. It just drastically weakens to a tropical depression, which is basically what we're forecasting at this point. And this is basically in line with our forecast at this point. So let's go to the deterministic model runs. This is the 060 run that the GFS filed this afternoon at 1 o'clock. You can see we have that 594 heat ring in the east of us, and we have that trough to the west of us. And keep in mind, this is the look at 500 millibars. Down at the surface, we have moisture continuing to evac from the Gulf, which is affecting much of north and central Texas and even southern Texas at this point. And of course, that will mean we'll continue to mention the chance of scattered showers and thunderstorms from this thing. Highs will be in the highs will struggle to get out of the upper 80s at this point, due to the fact that moisture is affecting and lots of cloud cover from this thing. Now let's go to the 3-kilometer NAM. This is valid basically at around 8 p.m. to 8 p.m. this evening, and you can see this thing basically landfalls near the Mississippi coast, and this landfalls near the Mississippi coast. Keep in mind that the main threats from this will range from heavy rain to gusty winds to small isolated tornadoes and water spouts from this thing. And once this thing and basically tomorrow, the main threats will basically go to heavy rain and small isolated tornadoes. Now keep in mind the small isolated tornado thing, these tornadoes will be very quick and very quick to pop out, and basically will come at a moment's notice. So that's why you always need to be aware of these things. So, but let's go to our neck of the woods. This is the radar, the HRRR model at noon today, and you can see it has a batch of scattered showers and thunderstorms off to our west of us, but we are also under the gun of scattered showers and thunderstorms throughout the day. So I'd say the best chance of any one spot getting wet during the afternoon and evening hours is around 50-50 at this point. It's around 50-50 at this point due to the scattered nature of the thunderstorms. Again, we'll struggle to get out of the mid-80s today due to the moisture affection and cloud cover. But Wednesday, now this is Wednesday, you can see that we do start to clear out just a little bit, but we can still mention the chance for isolated showers and thunderstorms by Wednesday. In Wednesday, highs will be in the low 90s at this point with a mix of sun and clouds. Thursday, you can see the GFS basically dissipates Gordon into an open wave at this point, not impacting North Texas at all. But down here, we'll continue to mention a chance of isolated scattered showers and thunderstorms with a mix of sun and clouds. Highs will be in the low 90s. And this is Friday. Moisture continues to evac from the Gulf. Again, as a result of that, we'll continue to mention a chance of scattered showers and thunderstorms. Highs will be in the upper 80s to low 90s. Again, with more clouds than sun at this point. And you can see that this is the average rainfall for the next 7 days, valid through Tuesday morning of next week. You can see the very narrow path in which Gordon takes based off the QPF guidance. You can see the higher amounts basically in the lighter colors, the higher amounts basically from Mississippi through the central Arkansas through around Fort Smith, but that's where Gordon is expected to travel, but unfortunately down here in North Texas we don't get that amount of rain. We still get around 2 to 3 inches of rain during the next week or so. So we still get we still get lots of rain due to the tropical moisture eviction from basically everything that's been going on. So we still get some rain at this point, but not as much as anticipated. So let's go on to Saturday. Saturday we're still wet. We'll continue to mention the chance of scattered showers and thunderstorms. 50-50 chance at this point. Highs will be in, I'd say, around the mid 80s at this point. And Sunday we start to clear out as that surface front moves off to the east. We'll mention the chance of a few isolated showers and storms, but highs will still be in the low 90s with a mix in sun and clouds. Now here's Monday of next week. Monday that lifts off to the east. Highs will be in the low 90s. With a mix in sun and clouds at this point, obviously. But here's a week from today, Tuesday, the 11th of September. We have a pattern change here. 594 heat ring to the west. Down here, we continue to stay dry. In accordance with that, highs will be in the low 90s. And you see that system right there. That's tropical storm or hurricane Florence at that point. And watch how this recurves with time. Now, this is the end of the 10-day forecast period. This is Thursday, the 13th of September. Now the GFS actually has basically has a broad ridge just to the north of us for the central United States, and the GFS has some sort of tropical mischief basically impacting Houston and the coastal Texas at this point. And right now, I don't believe that at this point, because the GFS did struggle with indicating Tropical Storm Gordon at the earlier in the other deterministic runs. So it's another one of those cases where we will believe it when we see it. But you can see for the numbers for the next 15 days coming off the GFS ensemble, you can see that highs basically stay at around the upper 80s to low 90s at this point from now through the middle of September. And I think at this point we should be done with. I think we've been done with seeing highs in the mid to upper 90s for this year. That's it for the Texas weather discussion video for today. I'll notes in the blog. Next video here should be posted at around 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. If you can, catch your local TV stations on the air this afternoon at 4, 5, 6, and 10. Thanks for watching. Have a great day, and Godspeed.